I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Education. It's a regular public meeting, February 26, 2015. And Mrs. Saradaki, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Dr. Kulikowski?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Whitehouse?
Here.
Mrs. Winkler?
Here.
Mrs. Warner?
Here.
Mrs. Cleary?
Here.
Mrs. Bauer?
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Can you please join me in the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the board just met in executive session, and we discussed personnel, the detention and suspension report, and HIB. Notices of this meeting were published with the Borough Clerk of Fanwood and the Township Clerk of Scotch Plains, with the times and with the patch. And we do have just additions to the agenda, so we can review those. We have 1S, out-of-district placements, 3S, approval of field trip request, and under business functions, 4 BUS, related services with private vendors, 8 BUS, safe routes to, oh, that's removing that from the agenda. 14 BUS is submission of a HIP grant to NJEA. Is there anything else?
Request to attend workshop.
Okay, and we'll get to that. And so, in accordance with policy 9322-R, it's an opportunity for the public to come to the microphone, and all we ask is that you give your name and the town in which you reside. Okay, seeing no one, we're going to move on to the committee reports. Do we have any committees that met? Okay, Mrs. Winkler.
I have a report. Yesterday, the Shared Services Coordinating Council met. There were a number of things that we discussed. We did talk about safe routes to schools grants. The Scotch Plains is considering possibly applying for one moving forward. Whether they do or not, Fanwood has been applying for one. They were recently awarded a grant for which they are planning to install sidewalks along Madison Avenue, kind of near School 1 as well as Park. Going forward, for any submissions by either municipality, it would help to add weight to their application if we had some sort of either a resolution or a policy or something in place to support the Safe Routes to Schools program. So we are looking into that, and we will draft something up later on.
Okay.
In the future. So other things we discussed, Deb is having a meeting next week with representatives from Scotch Plains and from Fanwood for both cable channels to discuss the possibility of getting TV coverage of high school events. Other things that were important to us. We are going to try to work together, all three parties, towards applying for a Kids Recreation Trust Fund grant. I think that's from the county, to upgrade the fields by Terrell. There was some discussion of the parking situation at Park Middle School. There are currently about 100 parking spots in the lot and about 140 staff members who use the lot. And so there was some discussion about what we could do for that. There was some suggestion about possibly permitting parking along Park Avenue in front of the school, as well as maybe permitting down some of the side streets for our staff to park there. There was some discussion about possibly paving between School 1 and Park, an area there to make additional parking, and we're looking at our options now and see what's best. There was very little discussion about removing voting from the schools. We have a number of schools that are polling stations. We'd like to get that out of the schools if we can. Deb does have a list by priority of which schools are most in need of trying to get this out. And we are going to be contacting the Board of Elections to try to work something out with them. There was some discussion about the drop-off at Brunner. In general, things seem to have been working rather well until the ice and snow season has come up. Number of cars had been parked in the street and when the snow came down, and so plows went kind of around them, and now there are bits of ice and snow there. There's ice gathering in areas that should be crosswalks, and a lot of people are walking their kids through the streets to get them to school. There are no sidewalks. So Scotch Plains, I know, was going to possibly look into that. Maybe they could plow closer to the curbs. That, I guess, also goes along with the Safe Routes to Schools grants, if, possibly we can get some sidewalks there. And then there was some discussion, we are going to bid for paving in the parking lot at the high school as well as at Terrell to be done this summer. And Fanwood was interested in possibly jumping on a bid with us for areas that they would like to pave as well. So.
Are there questions for Mrs. Winkler about anything? Just as a reminder to the public, the Shared Services Committee is an opportunity for the school board along with the two towns to work together and, as Mrs. Winkler mentioned in one of her examples, possibly save some money along the way, as well as coordinate on things like the Safe Routes to School. Anyone else? No other committees? For the public, we had several committee reports last week and discussed those. So we'll move to the instructional update, which is about the budget. And Mrs. Saradaki, I'm guessing you're going to be using the screen? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I got it.
Good evening. This is a presentation of the 2015-16 budget. It is the budget's... Lights on. Hello? Oh, okay. This is a presentation of the 2015-16 budget. It's a budget still in process. It doesn't need to be submitted to the county until after our next board meeting on March 20th. So it's fairly final. There's still some things we're working on at this point. This is our history of our student enrollment for our elementary schools over the past 6 years. You'll see that the numbers on the bottom reflect the year-to-year change, and we have decreased a total of 113 students in the elementary schools since 2008. In the middle schools, we've increased 89 students. We have a bubble that is progressing through the schools. It's partway through the middle schools at this point. And in the high school, we have increased a total of 106 students since 2008. Overall, our district enrollment has increased 48 students. You'll see a line there for bedside. In the past, in 2008 and 2009, that number was carried separately. Now it's incorporated into the school numbers. That's why you see zeros across the bottom since 2010. And here you'll see the graph of the student enrollment. Overall, it is relatively flat because it has gone up and down in the various schools. Our operating revenue for 2015-16, there is a 2% cap on our local tax levy. So we're anticipating that the local tax levy will be $81,130,282. We have a fund balance that we've carried over from last year that was surplus to help offset the costs in 2015-16. Other local sources are interest, rental of the facilities, refunds that we get from various schools when we send students out for tuition one year. The following year, we either get an additional bill or a refund, and the refunds are included in here, as well as E-rate. State aid, you see, has remained exactly the same to the dollar as last year. Extraordinary aid is money we never know exactly what's going to be allocated to us because it's based on the number of schools that apply. It's a fixed pool of money. And then we have the federal Medicaid initiative, and that number is provided to us by the state that we're to budget. And so graphically, you can see that the local tax levy is almost 95% of our total revenue in the operations, and state aid is 3.4%. State aid is made up of 5 different categories: categorical transportation aid, special ed aid, security aid, and then 2 new categories added last year, which is based, I believe, on approximately $10 per student, is park readiness aid and per pupil growth aid. We also receive grants from the federal government. Those are the IDEA preschool, Title I, and Title IIA. You'll see that the budget amount is slightly less than the 2014-15 dollars. We're always advised to budget less because they never know for sure what the federal government will actually give out in grants, and those numbers aren't available generally until June. We have revenues from state sources. We have a preschool grant, $49,500. Non-public and Chapter 190, that should be, 192, 193. That is money that's pass-through money. We receive the money to provide to the non-public schools. We have our ice hockey and lacrosse teams, which are paid to play. And the amount that the district funds the preschool for is included here also. And that's $332,732. The $223,200 is what we anticipate receiving for preschool tuition. The repayment of debt for 2015-16 will decrease 3.5%. That is payment on the bonds that were issued several years ago. That is the principal and interest. Our proposed operating budget for this year consists of salaries, benefits, tuition, facilities maintenance, transportation, capital expenditure, and other expenses. For a total a proposal for next year of $85,560,209. Graphically, you can see that a full 75 to 76% is salaries and benefits. Then the balance, 8% tuition, 4% facility maintenance, 3% transportation, 2% capital expenditures, and 7% other expenses. That 7% other expenses includes all teacher supplies, office supplies, textbooks, media center supplies and books, testing materials, classroom and office furniture, extracurricular activities, teacher workshops and training, legal, audit, and other professional services, postage, copy machines, paper, telephone costs, internet access for the district, purchase services, which include occupational therapists, speech, ABA therapy, physical therapists, includes any technology that's not purchased through the lease purchase agreement, and our general insurance, which includes liability insurance on our buildings and such. Staffing increases that we're asking for 2015-16. We're asking for a high school PE teacher, which should eliminate any 6th periods for the high school for PE. High school hall monitor for August for athletics and band. This is just an extension of the year for one of our hall monitors. So it doesn't, it's not an FTE position, it's just extra time for that position. A middle school basic skills teacher, a middle school nurse, middle school special ed teacher for self-contained, because our numbers coming in to next year are going to be double what they are this year. Middle school special ed aide for the self-contained class, a middle school supervisor of special ed. It would be a supervisor of special ed for the district, but the focus would be on the middle schools. Initiatives supported by the 2015-16 budget. Summer work for cyclical review, additional substitute coverage for professional development, instructional coaching and lesson study, textbook updates for zoology, forensic science, social studies alive for grades 5, and health for grades 9 to 12. Oh, I'm sorry, grade 1 and 5. Teaching Strategies Gold, a program that we've been looking at for preschool and kindergarten. Students to students learning opportunities for high school and middle school students. New elementary music workbooks, an expansion of technology hardware where appropriate based on curriculum. We also have other initiatives, a couple of other initiatives we are currently looking at, and that's one of the reasons this budget is not considered final. If we move in the direction, if the board chooses to, it may involve using some of our banked cap to balance the budget. 2015-16 capital and maintenance items budget. We budget $650,000 for technology lease purchase. Completing the renovation of the high school science labs is $325,000. Musical instruments, $34,000. Boiler replacement at Park Middle School, and that's one of 3 boilers. The other 2 are in good condition. It's $210,000. A rooftop unit for Park Middle School music room, it's almost $20,000. That's needed because what's there currently does not work well, and it's easy to put this unit on because I guess the ceiling was built below what used to be a skylight. So it'll be an easy installation. A truck for grounds, asbestos remediation, which we continue every summer, parking lot repaving, bathroom upgrades, a net to protect the turf field from baseballs. That's for when lacrosse is playing. Custodial equipment, other capital needs including security, and New Jersey debt service assessment. And any questions? That would be fine.
Mrs. Edwards, can you get the lights for us?
Beautiful. Classic.
Okay, so, questions for Mrs. Saradaki?
Yes?
It's a lot of information. Thank you very much for pulling this together. I'm trying to figure out what it is that we're doing new and differently. So the first thing that's clear is the request for an additional 6 positions. That's new, right? I mean, you're asking for 6 new positions.
Yes.
What is the price tag associated with that?
Approximately $500,000.
500. That seems.
That includes insurance.
That's with benefits, okay.
Mhm.
And, are all of these driven by enrollment? So if we couldn't do all of them, which ones? I heard you saying the middle school positions were because we were doubling the number of special ed students in the middle schools? Is that right?
The numbers of students coming up from the elementaries requires another section of self-contained. So
A section, do you mean one classroom?
one classroom. So we currently have one classroom at Park Middle School. We need, and the numbers are almost to capacity. So we cannot put 5, 6, 7 other students in that class. There's too many students, so we have to open up another self-contained classroom.
Okay, so I gather that the cost of the current classroom's about $500,000, and so this $500,000 is, no, because not all of them are.
Right, Mrs. Warner, that's, the 6 positions are all, the total is $500,000 for all the positions.
Right, so it's just the last 3 that are special ed positions, right?
Well, there are 4
Well,
if you count the
basic
supervisor,
skills.
Right. The basic skills, is that,
That's
Link
not really
the-
special ed, but it's
Right, okay.
support for students.
okay, so I'm just trying to understand the positions that are, I would sound absolutely necessary are for the 3 positions that are linked to the doubling in the special ed class.
Right now with PE, we're paying 5 high school teachers, 6 periods to,
So that's kind of a wash then, right? Because you're, or is it less money or more money? What are we?
well, actually, it's more money to hire a teacher, but we're at the max of 6 periods we can have. So if we had an issue where we needed to divide a class and add a 6th period, we don't have the capability.
So that's really a high need, sounds like. Okay, and then the middle school basic skills teacher is driven by what?
Enrollment.
Enrollment.
The number of students that need assistance.
So it's not just enrollment, it's that the
It's a
kids-
combination.
Yeah.
I mean, we have more students in the middle schools over time, and we have students that have academic needs, and we were really stretched this year in terms of supporting them. And so there's nothing on this list that is sort of just a wish list. These are all, they're driven by very concrete needs.
Okay, can you explain the high school PE teacher then?
The high school PE teacher is
Oh,
to
that's the
offset the
sixth
sixth
period.
periods.
I'm sorry.
Right.
The hall monitor, that's no cost.
Well, there's a slight
Minimal.
cost.
Minimal.
Right.
Okay. And then the middle school nurse,
Right now, we have 1.5 nurses at each middle school. The needs of the students are becoming greater with the different medications that all the different students have. The coverage is just needed for coverage at the schools.
okay. Okay, that's all for now. I'll come back to you.
Other questions from anyone?
Yeah, I do.
Mr. Whitehouse?
The students to science for high school and middle school, is that character ed?
No.
What is that?
That's a program that we've had for the last 2 years that has been very successful and has been funded by the Educational Enrichment Foundation. Dr. Mass can add more to it, but basically we take 40 middle school students to high-tech science labs.
Oh, that's, okay, I know what that, I
Right,
just didn't
right.
know what we were calling
And we
it.
also have some high school students that have access to it. And
Oh, all
we
right,
don't-
I looked at that as strictly, I thought we were only doing it in the middle schools.
High school just started.
the high school just start, we've done a small group of high school students as well. We have been extraordinarily grateful to the support that we've gotten from the Educational Enrichment Foundation for that. But we think at this time, given the success that we've seen in the program, we'd like to find a way to bring it within our budget.
No, we had those, the folks
Yes.
that got to experience it here, and it looked like a fantastic program. So having district funding to help support that, I'm in favor of. I just wanted to make sure I understood what it was. The other question is on what may have been your last slide, your last line, New Jersey Debt Service Assessment.
That is on the bonding that we did several years ago, and
Yeah.
New Jersey decided that we were responsible for some of their interest, which they never told us about when we
Okay,
originally
so I wanted
bonded.
just to make sure that I was understanding this kick in the behind that we're getting from the state, and just to highlight that as well. So that 175,000, we've had politicians at the state level through the years, so I'm not necessarily kicking the current administration, but give me time. But this was where we were promised 40%, like with the ROD grants, 40% reimbursement. I don't know at the time if it was 40%, but we were told, and there was banners and visits from state politicians, and isn't this a great program? Well, 8 years, 9 years later, they're saying, here's your assessment, so you're gonna be, so in the grand scheme of things, that 40% that looked wonderful is not 40% anymore, because we are paying it out of our operating budget. Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that, I'll be polite, adjustment that the state has provided us. I think too, that to the questions that Mrs. Warner was asking also, I appreciate them. I've just always, when we're doing budgets, and we see this at times too, that it's almost, the balloon with air. And for the PE teacher that we may need to hire now, that sixth period, what happens is, by contract, we're allowed to have our educators lose a prep period and take on they call it a sixth period, for additional pay. But there's only a certain percentage we can go up to, because from the bargaining unit standpoint, and I get it, that we're deferring hiring more employees. So it's in their interest to say, no, we'd like our employees to have the ability to make extra money by working more and giving up something to do that. But at the end of the day, you just can't overload it with the equivalent in the private sector of having everybody work lots of overtime. That's, I kind of think, is the analogy. But if we can reduce one block of sixth period by one teacher, because a lot of times it's a little bit in science, a little bit in social studies, it's sprinkled all over. If we can, with one hire, remove a big block of sixth period, that allows, I think, our administration and the different content areas a whole lot more flexibility. So I think, again, it's an expense here, but the payoff is more flexibility next year if we run into a lot of areas where it's a couple periods in this content area, in this building, and a couple others. So I think that's kind of paying a little more for the flexibility we know we get hit with every year as far as the need. And the basic skills, is there a tie-in? Because I interpreted that as the last presentation we had related to special services on how our tuition has been dropping each year, and in fact, we're looking at when it gets to special ed, that as we're bringing more children or being able to hold more students in, they're going to need services, and they're going to need support, and if it's an aide, if it's more PT or OT, at the end of the day, there's more costs, besides all the educational benefits of having the child in their community with their peers in their neighborhoods. From the cold, callous dollar side, there's more cost certainty if we have that contract with a PT/OT or an employee versus the staggering tuition rates that sometimes they get trued up like 2 years later. I just read something where Mountainside is really getting like almost $1 million bill from Berkeley Heights 2 years after the fact, because as a sending and receiving district, they're tightening up, or they're finally, it was in today's paper. It was, or yesterday's paper, whatever. The point being is, if we can not only have the kids here, but the services in-house, there's a lot of benefits besides educational, financial as well. So again, it's the balloon with the air. You push here, it's going to pop out there. And I think some of these things are they have to be seen where the counterweight is, and that may be a reduction or a flatness in another line item. So am I understanding that as far as from the special ed, some of those areas are maybe hand in glove, or at least counterweighting some of these?
Part of it, yes, but basic skills in this case would really be a support that would help learners that are already struggling and go through the INRS process, to give them extra support so that they do not become a special ed student.
Okay.
Okay, so it's operating the other way. So, I mean, it could be the case that students that we keep in district might be declassified and might need a little bit of an increase in support. They might go through basic skills, but it's really designed to give whatever supports are necessary to help students achieve reading and math, so they get the support and they don't have to be classified or eligible for a more restrictive environment like a resource center or a self-contained classroom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. That's all I've got for now.
Okay, anyone else have questions about the budget? Dr. Kulikowski?
I don't have a question, but it was nicely done, very succinct, easy to follow. Thank you, Ms. Saradarki.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Mrs. Warner?
Thank you. So in terms of revenue, on your charts, the first chart on revenue is operating revenue, and you're showing the local tax levy going up by the 2% up to
Yes.
the cap, right? And then does the chart revenue grants and entitlements relate to the operating revenue chart? Is that in addition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
In
because when you're talking the grants and entitlements, they generally have offsetting expenses that aren't part of the operating expenses.
Okay.
Actually fund something different.
Okay. So there are, so you're saying there are equal, because this has gone, these are going down. The revenue grants and entitlements has gone down a bit?
Well, only because we don't find out until June what the actual numbers are, and the advice every year is to budget less than you received the year before.
Okay.
Because
so-
a lot of it comes from federal, and they don't know
Right.
what they'll be.
So if we don't get it, is that going to be, do we just cut spending in these areas? Or is it a gap that needs to be filled from the operating budget?
Some of it would just not be spent, and some of it would be a gap.
So can you, at some point, tell us how much of a gap, we might have to deal with?
I can tell you what you might have to deal with. Actually, it will probably not be a gap. It'll probably be in the neighborhood of the same of what it was last year.
Okay, so there would be no ramification if,
Most likely not.
okay, so just, we wouldn't be spending it, okay. So, the increase then, so you're projecting an increase of 1.89 in total for the operating revenue, right?
Yes, and that is because we can increase the tax levy, but with the state aid remaining the same, the total increase is less than the 2%.
Right, okay. But it is going up, and so we end up with about $1.6 million in more revenue.
Yes.
And I can see you're proposing to spend about $500,000 on these new positions. And what does the rest of the increase go for?
Well, we have contracts across the board that have 2% increases in salaries. And a good part of the increase goes to increase in health insurance. Right now, we're budgeting approximately 16% increase in health insurance
Okay,
based on our, I was hoping to see it go down, but we had another bad loss month last month, so.
okay. So the $1.6 million that we're going up in revenue is being completely used up by the new positions and by increases in health insurance and
Salaries.
salaries.
Well, it's anticipated increases in salaries and the actual increase, depending on who has a contract and who doesn't.
So, anyone else? Okay. I just wanted to add my thanks as well, and I actually, there is a lot in the papers right now about budgets and school districts, and I just want to take my hat off to this district, both the staff and also finance committees for years past who have done a careful job so that we're not in the situation that sometimes we're reading about in the newspaper where we're having to raise more fees and do all these things that once we had to do briefly, but we've been very fortunate, and I think we have done really well with not having to go out so often for money, just when we have felt like we really needed it. So anyway, thank you very much. And pass that on. I know it involves a lot
of people.
for the staff and the principals and supervisors and everyone, so thank you. So we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Tonight, I would ask the board approve the 4 out-of-district placements that are listed on the agenda for the benefit of the public, these are not all new out-of-district placements. Some of them are adjustments to placements.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. 2S, I would ask that the board affirm the superintendent's decisions in the 4 harassment, intimidation, and bullying cases that were reported during executive sessions on January 22nd and January 29th, 2015.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
3S, I would ask that the board approve the field trip that is listed as an addition to the agenda. Our Terrell Middle School 7th grade Italian classes will be attending Montclair State on March 25th to participate in a competition with other middle school students who are studying Italian. This year's theme is Made in Italy.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
And 4S, excuse me, where are we? 4S we did last month, and so I would ask that the board approve the personnel agenda as discussed in exec this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Is that a roll call?
Yep.
Dr. Kulikowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleary?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehouse?
Yes.
Mrs. Winkler?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer?
Yes.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. So we have another opportunity for the public in accordance with policy 9322-R. Anyone wishing to address the board can come to the microphone. Okay, seeing no one, we're going to move on to the business functions. Mrs. Saradaki?
Yes, I'm going to block everything that I'd like you to vote on. I'm asking for your approval of the staff training, the superintendent's recommendations on the report dated February 26, 2015. That's 1 BUS. 2 BUS is acknowledgement of receipt of disbursement listings from various bank accounts for the month of January. 3 BUS is the receipt of the security and fire drill reports for the month of January. 4 BUS, which is continued on the additions to the agenda, is approval of vendor-related services and that's for special services, various students. 5 BUS is the submission of the Ellie grant application and acceptance of the funds, and that's for the preschool grant. 6 BUS and 7 BUS were approved on February 19th. 8 BUS were withdrawing for the time being. The reason for that is that Fanwood and Scotch Plains didn't know if it was a policy or a resolution that we needed. So once we get clarification, we'll work on that. 9 BUS is, I'm asking for your approval for the architect to oversee the installation of security systems at various schools in the district. The cost would be $33,000. 10 BUS and 11 BUS were approved on February 19th. 12 BUS is receipt of the business reports for the month of January 2015. That's the board secretary report, the treasurer of school funds reports, and budget adjustments. 13 BUS is approval of the bill list for the period January 23rd through February 20th in the amount of $2,686,786.74. And 14 BUS is submission of the NJEA Frederick L. Hip Foundation for Excellence in Education grant. This is a grant that's being submitted on behalf of kindergarten teachers in the amount of $9,108.
So moved.
Second.
Are there questions or for Mrs. Saradaki? I know we had an opportunity to ask questions and discuss things last week, but anything that's come up since then?
I'd just like to note that the HIP Foundation for Excellence in Education grant that the staff is applying for is from School One, and we're very grateful for those teachers who have stepped forward to try to develop this grant. and we wish them the very best. If the board approves submission, we hope they're successful in getting it.
Yes.
Yes, it was nicely done.
Yes.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Saradaki. So we're going to move on to board policies. Is there anything new? No? New board business? Other board business, requests to attend workshops.
Yes, I'd like to request approval to attend a New Jersey School Board Association workshop on developing salary guides,
Okay,
in March.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for doing that. Okay, workshop reports. I would just like to mention that Dr. Hayes and I were at the Garden State Coalition of Schools meeting yesterday. We're fortunate to be members of this group that brings together, and we're members, Scotch Plains are members of the trustees, executive committee of the Garden State Coalition. At yesterday's meeting, the primary focus was on park because we had Barry Ehrlichson there, who's the chief, forget what she's chief of,
Now,
but she's,
she's assistant commissioner now.
oh, is she? Okay, all right, so, so it was very interesting to hear her updates about what was happening across New Jersey with park and across the consortium in terms of readiness and the numbers of calls they're getting and, the capacity for calls and so forth. I don't know, I'll let Dr. Hayes say if she got anything that was especially useful.
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Well, because a lot was just information
Yes.
about the process.
Yes, there were some helpful pieces of information that Dr. Ehrlichman was able to share with us. She did explain the process of how we're going to be coding the tests. She also talked about the dashboard that she has access to in terms of being able to track the number of tests that have been successfully completed, and also how Pearson is supporting through help desks districts that may encounter some technical difficulties during test administration. They have a triage system in terms of ticketing where they've got a really large number of people manning help desks because they're very vested in trying to make this new initiative successful. So that was good information to hear. She encouraged us to get back to her with any implementation issues that we have because they are also trying to be responsive on our State Department end in terms of being able to assist districts as we move forward with this new format for standardized testing.
I do think one thing that was a good takeaway is that she seems to be interested in feedback from the superintendents about various things moving forward. And so that's good, a good thing. Various questions that she wanted their advice and input on. And I thought that was a really good thing. And it is actually amazing that she was sitting there on her computer and she could tell how many students during the day were taking the test, how many finished, and, she's got it all at her fingertips there, so.
Yes, Ohio successfully tested 90,000 students last week.
I don't think anybody in the room really realized that it was quite so, everything was quite so clear.
Right.
But in any case, it was very interesting. We learned a lot and obviously some things that were helpful. Anyone else with reports? Okay, so other board business, we also have Youth Art Month, which we always appreciate here. And so is there anyone who would like to read the resolution? Mrs. Winkler?
I move that the board adopt the following resolution. Whereas art education contributes powerful educational benefits to all elementary, middle, and secondary students, including the following. Art education develops students' creative problem-solving and critical thinking abilities. Art education teaches sensibility to beauty, order, and other expressive qualities. Art education gives students a deeper understanding of multicultural values and beliefs. Art education reinforces and brings to life what students learn in other subjects. And art education interrelates student learning in art production, art history, art criticism, and aesthetics. Whereas our national leaders have acknowledged the necessity of including arts experiences in all students' education, and whereas March is officially recognized as Youth Art Month, now therefore be it resolved that the Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Ed does hereby endorse March 2015 as Youth Art Month.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries, and we,
We have one of our premier art teachers
oh,
sitting in
there
the
we
back.
go, you're cheering. And we're proud of all of our art teachers. Approval of the minutes, can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any abstentions for anyone, or, yes?
I'm abstaining from the first two meetings in January.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this is our last and final opportunity for public comment, if anyone wants to come to the microphone. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the good of the order. Yes, Mr. Murray.
Just wanted to let everybody know that third grade Cole School is participating in Odyssey of the Mind this weekend at J.P. Stevens High School. I think there's a 9:40 session and a 12:30 session. So for those of you who would like to be in the area and participate or actually watch it, I went last year, and it's a very interesting event. You get a lot of very cool things that these kids do across all grades. But I do know the Cole School third graders have been working hard to get this done, so.
Wonderful, thank you for the heads up. Anyone else for the good of the order?
Oh, I had the pleasure last weekend of seeing 3 out of 4 performances of Annie Jr. over at Terrell. Mr. Thompson got himself into it deep. He decided that every student who wanted to be in it would be in it, and he had over 80 students who wanted to be in it. He had 2 full casts, which included several additional orphans and servants and such. And it was really wonderful. It was interesting to see the differences between the 2 different casts performing, different chemistry between the different performers, and but both casts were really good. It was fun.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for the good of the order?
Sure.
Mr. Whitehouse.
So I'm reading to make sure I don't get it wrong. Congratulations to our girls swim team, our varsity swim team. They are state champions. They won this past. What? Applause, and I'm just reading the article. Yeah, they were down in, were they in Princeton as well, or were
TCNJ.
defeated? I'm sorry, TCNJ. They defeated Princeton to win their first championship since 2005. The boys, they made it to the state finals as well. They did not win. It was close. In both cases, our teams that they didn't take a lot of first place wins, but the articles talked about the depth of our swimmers. So you can rack up a lot of points with seconds and thirds. You don't have to be the first place finisher in the meets. They said that's how the girls took it, and that's how the boys almost won theirs, with the depth of both teams. So congratulations to them. A few years back when we were in the finals, I did attend. It's a pretty cool thing to watch swim meets. I had no clue on who was winning and how the scoring was, but when Scotch Plains jumped, I did as well, and it was a lot of fun. I'm sorry I couldn't make these, but again, congratulations to our girls and the boys. Gosh, they, one win away from being a state champ. So we're good on the ice, on the field, on the turf, and even in the water. So well done, our athletes.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Are you saying yes?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I just wanted to thank our superintendents for doing I thought, fabulous job with the 2 information sessions that we had. We had one again last night with over 100 people. I think we had 150 at the first one, and every question was answered, and I think people left with a lot more information. So thank you for doing a wonderful job. And the presentations are on the website, the presentation. And then I just wanted to highlight on the agenda that before our next meeting, we have our annual board PTA roundtable conversation on March 10th at 7:30 at Terrell Middle School. So anyone who would like to come for that, we'll look forward to seeing you then. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a good evening. Good night, everybody.